Hey, Soul Survivors, we're going to talk about the mental health of teachers also in the workforce. So, if you're not necessarily a teacher, this might still be helpful because there are a lot of toxic work environments. So, there was this one person who had asked about C-PTSD. Can you get that from teaching? And I have said before, that there's toxic workforces, but also like the children. Narcissists are kind of like grown children. And it can really affect people when it's toxic. And we'll talk about that. So in 2017, there was a survey by the AFT, which is the American Federation of Teachers, and they saw that 61% of educators considered leaving the profession or retiring early due to work-related stress. Most teachers don't make it more than 5 years. And that's pretty profound. These people, a lot of times that's their lifelong dream, and they go to college for it. It's a 4-year degree. Some go on for their master's, but most teachers don't make it 5 years. So the Natural Center for Education reported that on average, 8% of public school teachers left the profession between 2015 and the 2016-2017 school years, 8% at one time. So mental health challenges in that survey by the American Psychological Association, known as the APA, found that teachers experience higher levels of stress than the general population. And there are about 61% of teachers that reported work as a significant source of stress. It's the only job I've ever had that I've cried about or during. And in 2019, they had a Gallup poll, 28% of teachers reported feeling a lot of stress during the school day. The stress level was higher than that reported by other professionals. It can be extremely toxic or challenging because you have to keep the parents happy, the administrators happy, and the children happy too, all while trying to maintain your sense of sanity. So teachers honestly have such a high workload. When I was teaching at the grade level, I've taught everything from pre-K 3, which is 3-year-olds, up to college level. And high school and college were much easier than the younger years. Pre-K 3 wasn't all that bad. It's preschool. It wasn't too bad. But when you start getting in the grade levels where you are under the Board of Education and where you're being evaluated and you have, certain standards, there's state standards basically for every lesson that you teach, and you have to do your lesson plans. You have to document which state standard it is meeting. And there's just a lot of stuff. You got to keep up with the grades and the workload. Teachers often work long hours, even before and after school. When I was teaching at the grade level, I was working 16 hours a day, every day, even on the weekends. It was almost too much to where every waking moment, working through lunch, and that can lead to burnout. So a 2020 Learning Policy Institute report found that teachers work an average of 53 hours a week. I see so many teachers doing more than that. And it was really interesting. The last school, not the one I'm currently at, but the last school that I went to, they gave us this little light switch. And they were trying to be like poetic about it. And they're like, at the end of the day, this is to symbolize, just turn that switch off, go home, basically saying, don't overdo it, just work your contracted hours and you're fine. But you cannot do that, because if you want to be an effective teacher, remember, you get graded on that or evaluated on that, and it can affect your license or whether you get hired anywhere, or even if you keep your job, if you're found as ineffective. And what's really stressful about that is there might be a bad day where either the kids are off or maybe you're off. Maybe something happened in your own life, but you get evaluated twice for that year. And if you're seen as ineffective, you could lose your job over it. And it could just be, a bad day that we all have. You could be perfect the whole rest of the school year, but there's also a lack of resources. And there was a report, the NCES in 2018, that highlighted that teachers in high poverty schools often face more significant challenges to limited resources and inadequate facilities. I worked at everything from Detroit, Benton Harbor, if you remember hearing about the Benton Harbor riots. I think Detroit is now the fourth, and Benton Harbor is maybe the second most dangerous city or something like that. But pretty much the highest of the dangerous cities in Michigan, and I'm in the sixth most dangerous city right now in an urban district. And I worked at a little bit more affluent schools and then also in the private Christian realm. And I did go to a Muslim school for a little while. The Muslim school was really no problems. The Christian school, that was hard to evaluate that because I only had 8 students, and 8 students are a lot easier. So, but in the urban ones, there's a lot more fights, a lot more stressed out kids, and a lot more challenges. So there are stressors in those children's lives, adverse childhood experiences known as ACE or ACE. There's a survey that happened in 2017, AFT survey, 84% of teachers reported experiencing problems with the students' behavior. And managing disruptive behavior can be emotionally draining and contribute to mental health challenges. We also have to keep the children safe, but we're also not allowed to touch them. And unless you have CPI training, you're not allowed to break up fights. And I was even told that even if it's like a kid's about to lose their finger, that you can't, it's not life threatening, so you can't intervene. So sometimes you feel helpless, and you also don't want to hurt yourself. But there's times where you could break up a fight, but you're not allowed to. And it depends on if you're in private. I've worked in charter schools too. Charter schools have different confinements than the public schools. Public schools have a lot of things that you have to really be aware of. You've really got to watch your words and like above and beyond. So insufficient support, a lack of professional development opportunities, and inadequate support for mental health issues can exacerbate stress and contribute to burnout. I've been pretty lucky. Schools I've worked at have that ongoing professional development, but you also get frustrated sometimes when you have so much on your plate and you need to grade, you need to do this, you need to do that. And you go to a professional development that might not necessarily be time worthy. Some are not. But the mental health impact, teachers experiencing burnout can have symptoms of depression, anxiety, chronic fatigue. And you also have certain requirements where you can't talk about certain things that happened in your classroom. So you can't even express what's going on with your co-teachers that are just in different classrooms. So you can have chronic stress. That chronic stress can lead to burnout. It can even negatively affect your job performance. You can get exhausted or just want to cry. And I've heard teachers yell or cry with that diminished job satisfaction, and it can even lead to absenteeism. There's people who I see in these forums where they can't wait to leave the profession, and it's really sad because they went into it wanting the best for the children. I've also seen the differences in how children act over the years with the entitlement, and also how the parents are. Their parental support is nowhere near what it used to be. There's some great parents out there still, and that is so nice. It's almost refreshing. And that's kind of sad to say that, oh, it's refreshing. We have a parent who wants to be involved. So the mental health of teachers is closely linked to the student outcomes, and as well as educators' well-being directly influences the classroom environment and the quality of instruction. When you lose your passion, it starts to affect the student. And it's like this snowball thing. The students might start acting out more because you're not as vibrant and keeping them on task. And so, schools and districts are increasingly recognizing the importance of addressing teacher mental health. I'm very blessed where I'm at. We have Wednesdays, we have early release, and that's for the teacher's mental health, where we're supposed to stay, well, we have to stay there till, for an extra hour and a half. But that is so nice that it's like time to grade or enter grades. And initiatives may include providing mental health resources. At my school, we get 6 hours of mental health counseling for free. And There is professional development focused on stress management and well-being. We also talk about relating to the kids to understand what they're going through. Comprehensive approaches to educators' well-being involves fostering a positive school culture, encouraging work-life balance, and providing ongoing support for the teachers. So, exposure to traumatic events. Teachers can witness or experience traumatic events within the school environment, which are things like violence, accidents, natural disasters. I had a friend who was caught in a tornado that actually hit her school and did some damage. Luckily, they were all okay, but repeated exposure to such events can contribute to the development of C-PTSD, which is complex post-traumatic stress disorder, where it's continual. I worked at a school, it was a college, where there was a murder 20 minutes after I left in the parking lot, like 200 feet from my car, and where my car was. Teachers often have high levels of stress due to the workload, demanding expectations, challenges in managing the classrooms, prolonged exposure to chronic stressors in the workplace. And, we have to remember, did we write the objectives and the I can statements and I will, and I can demonstrate that, having to put the state standards on the board and having to change that and trying to make sure that everything is up to par in case you get a surprise walkthrough. So dealing with persistent behavioral challenges in the classroom, especially in high risk or under-resourced environments, can start to become emotionally and mentally taxing. And teachers experience this chronic stress when attempting to manage disruptive or aggressive behavior. And if there's inadequate support from administrators, colleagues, or the educational system, that can also cause that CPTSD. When you start feeling unsupported in handling challenging situations or facing workplace issues without proper assistance, can be traumatizing. You feel this pressure. You want to do the things that are right, but you also feel confinements, or you might fear losing your job because they never told you exactly how to handle a certain situation, or surprise things like, with the things with the school shooters, or we go on lockdown. Like there was a murder. Like I said, a lot of these are urban type schools, but there was a murder that happened maybe 3 blocks from the school at a cross section, and we were on lockdown because of the person on the loose. And it gets scary sometimes too. So bullying and harassment. Teachers can experience bullying, whether it's from students, parents, colleagues. And the thing is as far as bullying, because I kind of felt like I was being bullied, but when you're in the top position, technically they don't see it as being bullied. So kids can, say whatever they can over and over again, because technically you can leave, like quit. But I know a lot of different states where the teachers, by their contract, can't just leave. It's not an at-will state. So it can cause them not to have their license for, I believe, a year. Comment below if you guys have that. In Michigan, it is at will, but they can also fire you too. Usually they don't, but sometimes they will. Persistent mistreatment leads to that emotional distress and CPTSD. Challenges with administration, policy changes, bureaucratic issues within the educational system can be stressful. Also, they decide to change things. Feeling powerless or unsupportive in addressing these challenges can contribute to the trauma. And there's secondary trauma. Teachers who work with students who have experienced trauma themselves may develop secondary trauma. And exposure to these students' traumatic experience, coupled with the lack of coping mechanisms or support, can cause that CPTSD, lack of boundaries. And teachers may find it challenging to establish and maintain healthy boundaries, leading to overcommitment. A lot of times you're like, oh, but I have to get this done. I want to do a good job. And that increases this excessive workload as it is, and difficulties in maintaining that work-life balance. And it can start to infiltrate your personal life, causing problems at home, or you're just too tired to help with your own kids' social activities or study activities, that it can cause more stress, where you feel like you're failing your child or failing your husband, or your friends that it's so life consuming. Like I said, I will never go back to grade level teaching. What I do now is English as a second language, and I love it. I have a much smaller caseload. I have 150 students, but it's more of a tutoring thing. The kids that test out to a certain level, they have to be level 3 or above as far as English speaking skills, and we just kind of monitor them. And the newer learners, I do have class time with them, but it's such a manager. It's 10 students at a time as opposed to 34. I taught psychology, sociology, and women's studies at a high school, which was not all that bad. It was high school. The kids, it was an elective class. That makes a difference because the kids want to be there. But, if it was algebra or history or government, things like that, the kids don't always want to be there. So that causes more challenges. And I know we are pushing kids through, and they don't necessarily have the skills that they need. So there's causing more and more frustration. So if your child doesn't know how to read in 9th grade, they still are required to do 9th grade work, even if they can't read. So you give them a paper and it has the directions on it, but they can't read the directions. So it causes more stress in the kids. And when there's more stress, the kids act out. When the kids act out, there's more stress for the teacher. And since there are so many students, you don't really have time to do the one-on-ones with them. And I know middle school is probably the most challenging because of hormones and frustrations and kind of starting to turn into a young adult, wanting to exert their, dominance they're in that hierarchy. So there's also a lot of jealousy, and people start realizing the differences between boys and girls and crushes, and middle school is the most challenging. And the elementary students are a lot needier, and there has to be a certain way that you handle it. If you mess up in the first month, if you don't get a handle on it right in the beginning, your whole year is going to be messed up. You almost can't recover from it. So there's different techniques, but you would hope that by the time that they're in 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, that they start settling into certain routines. And it's not always that easy. So as far as C-PTSD, it can happen in the workplace. So it's really important to feel supported, to have somebody you can talk to. And, teachers aren't supposed to talk to each other about the different students. So you can't even really get advice. It's almost like, if you think about it, if you had a child and a babysitter, you'd want to say, how was he today? What did he do? Did he do certain things wrong? And we're not really supposed to go into depth of any behavioral problems of certain children. We're not supposed to talk about them. So definitely not out and about talking about them, like personally who they are. And it leads to just feeling unsupported. So I hope that was helpful. Burnout is real. It's amazing how many students or teachers leave the profession. And a lot of people think it's the easiest job out there. You're on your feet constantly. Your mind's going a million miles a minute thinking, how do I protect this? And everybody on task, how do I differentiate? Because kids are at different levels. So you can't just teach. You have to make sure that the kids, like I said, if it was a 9th grader who didn't know how to read, that you could make sure they had enough information so they could succeed as much as they can. So I hope that was helpful. Stay strong. Comment below if you're a teacher, some of your struggles when you feel supported that could help people, and when you feel challenged. Teaching's hard, but I give you guys credit. You can give me some credit too.